All right, cool. The room is open, Anna, so we'll just give it a couple seconds for people to filter in here. I see that attendee number ticking up. Very good. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of our career experts here at FlexJobs. And FlexJobs, for those of you who don't know, has been the most trusted site for remote job listings since 2007. We are thrilled to have as our guest today Anna Goehner, certified career coach and LinkedIn learning instructor, to discuss boundaries and self-advocacy as a team member. Before we dive into Anna's presentation, though, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items. This will be a roughly 60-minute webinar with a presentation from Anna, followed by an audience Q&A. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be emailed out to everyone later this week. If you have a question for Anna, please type it into the Q&A section rather than the chat section. And you can also use the thumbs up button in the Q&A section to vote up any other questions that you would like to hear answered. Chances are good we're not going to be able to answer every question today, but we are still confident you'll learn something helpful. So with all of that out of the way, I will now turn things over to Anna. Welcome, Anna, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. So first of all, let's begin with our agenda. I want to, go over what we're going to cover today. The why, the connection between boundaries, self-advocacy, and well-being. The how to avoid doing the work of two people for the price of one. Why simply saying no isn't always enough. The what ifs, when setting boundaries can backfire, and how to handle it. Strategies to be assertive while still being perceived as a team player. Tips for setting boundaries with workload, expectation, and digital presence. Being selfless was a badge of honor. A word that people always used to describe me was selfless. And I use that word as a badge of honor. I am originally from Brazil. I grew up in a culture where being a good girl meant you always said yes to everything. You put everyone's needs above your own, and you ran yourself on empty to serve others. That was what was expected of me, and that was the culture that I was in. That was what I've seen a lot of the women in my life, the way that they were, their behaviors, right? So that was what I was mimicking, believing that that was the best way to be: serve others and always put your needs the last thing on the priority list. So I just thought that that was the way to be, and that was just the way things were. When I moved to the US and started my career here, I brought that exact same mindset with me. I said yes to every project, every late night, every extra task. Every time somebody asked me to help them, I was yes. It was like an automated like way of being. And of course, that led me straight to burnout. I think many of us can relate to this feeling of believing that we always have to say yes. Every action has a reaction, believing that our reaction always had to be that straight. Oh, yeah, I can help. Yes, I can help. And this is the constant dilemma at work. We want to be helpful. We want to be seen as a team player, but we are also drowning. We worry that if we say no, we might be seen as difficult, or worse, we can risk our jobs. And we're going to discuss this, why sometimes saying just no can be an issue, because yes, you can risk your job, but also saying yes all the time, it doesn't necessarily make you a team player, but more like you're just going to start building that resentment of always being the person that, says yes to everything when you're working 60 plus hours a week already. So that fear is real. And, it's important to address that fear and those concerns. In fact, setting boundaries the wrong way can have negative consequences, as I was saying. If you just give an abrupt, like, no, I'm not going to do that, that can be an issue, because that's how, when you start being perceived as not a team player, I'm not going to even ask. But that's why we're here today, right? We're here because we're going to focus on the right way. The real goal for us is to find that balance, to be a team player while without sacrificing your well-being or your job. That is the goal. How do you find that balance? When do you say yes? When do you say no? How do you say no? How do you negotiate that boundary? So that's what we're going to discuss today. So I have a free resource just for you. If you stay until the end, I will share a link to a free resource that's currently not available on my website. This is a step-by-step guide. You learn easy and practical ways to create boundaries that feel supportive and empowering rather than uncomfortable or confrontational. You'll find specific phrases and strategies to help you protect your time without needing to say a straight, loud no. You don't want to miss this, and I'll have a link for you at the end of the presentation. So please stay with me. The first agenda item is the why, connecting boundaries to your career health. The connection between boundaries, advocacy, and well-being. So, what exactly is a boundary? I love this analogy of your life being like a house with a fence around it. That fence represents your boundaries. You are completely in charge of that gate. Sometimes a colleague comes to your door with a request, and you have the time, the energy, and the capacity to help. So you say, yes, that's great. You open the gate and you invite them in. The same goes for a door. If you ever worked in an office environment, you may have heard of the open door policy, when managers must keep their door open whenever possible, so people feel okay to come in and talk to them. But the reality is that that door is mostly closed because they are busy with meetings and other tasks. So that's usually the boundary for you. So you have to find different ways to communicate with them because the door is closed, but you need their attention. This really breaks down, into three simple parts. The boundary is the line itself, the fence, or the door. The self-advocacy is the communication of that line. Is, let's say you are at, you are at that gate or at that door, deciding whether you want to open it or you want to knock on that door. And the well-being is the positive result of managing that gate or that door effectively. Is having a peaceful, well-maintained home instead of a chaotic, overcrowded one. So always think either of a gate or at a door, as I have here for you in this image. You decide if you want to open that door and invite someone in, or if you are at that door and right there, like let's say somebody knocks on your front door. If it's somebody you don't know or something that you don't want to talk about, you might just say something and, they're going to leave. Or if it's someone, and you want to have a conversation, you open the door for them and then come in. And it's kind of that, think of that. I think like that's a day-to-day thing that we can relate. So think of a boundary either as like a fence or a door. Are you doing the work of two people for the price of one? The key signs you need to set boundaries. This image here says it all. How many times have you felt that way with people asking everything at the same time? It feels impossible to prioritize your tasks. I know I have experienced this. I have my computer, there were a ton of emails coming in. I had a bunch of priorities already on my list, but then because I worked in an open office, people felt that they could just come in at any time and give me more work. So always to give you a picture is that idea of working piling up on your desk, and sometimes that's not physically on your desk, but it's through email, right, to task to different things that you have to do, or when people come in and they ask you all sorts of things, right? So I think this image really represents how we feel sometimes, especially when we don't have boundaries, when we don't know how to put that gate up and either open or leave that gate closed, so that's what we're going to discuss here today. So do you feel a sense of constant fatigue? Not just like, oh, it's Monday, I'm tired, but that deep exhaustion that even a weekend can't fix. That's a classic sign of burnout. Let's say if you're constantly thinking about work, constantly thinking about, or anxious about your inbox, what's happening, even on weekends when you are spending time with loved ones or doing something you enjoy, that could be a sign of burnout. Have the lines between your work and your personal life become completely blurred? Maybe you're answering emails at dinner, thinking about a project while you are with your family, and you feel like you can never truly, clock off. You're always thinking about work. Do you have difficulty saying no? When someone asks for help, does yes just come out of your mouth automatically, even as your internal voice is screaming, I don't have time for this? How many times have we thought about this? I know I have been in this situation many times. This often leads to increased stress and anxiety. You might feel a constant sense of being overwhelmed, like you're always behind. It can never catch up. How many times have we felt that way? You're always behind. You can never catch up. There's always more work. There's always more work, right? So these are some signs that you might need to set some boundary. And finally, are you neglecting your own priorities? The things that fill your tank: hobbies, exercise, time with loved ones, or even just rest. Yes, rest, it has to be a part of your life. Those are the first things that get pushed aside when work gets busy. You are prioritizing everybody else, but not really your own needs. If you nod along to any of these, you are not alone. As I said, I've been there myself. I've experienced everything on this slide that we're saying right now. But these things don't mean that you're failing. There are signs that your current system is unsustainable, and there are things that you can do. There's something that you can do, about this. These are just the signs that it's time to build a better fence, or going back to our analogy, it's time to find a way to manage that door, open your door, right? It's time to think about those things. So setting boundaries feel overwhelming, and you don't want to let people down. I understand that. I've been there. I have people pleasing tendencies. So you may have heard that, like, oh no, especially like if you are a people pleaser, like has those tendencies like I have, that saying no feels really intimidating, guilt inducing, it feels uncomfortable, it feels confrontational. But we will explore easier ways to do this in a way that works for you. Agenda item number 2 is the how, strategies for success. Why simply saying no isn't always enough. A blunt no can feel like a slammed door. Why saying no is not enough? You hear everywhere that no is a complete sentence. But can you imagine saying a straight up no to your boss or a colleague when they ask for help? Can you imagine doing that in the workplace right now? That's what makes you being perceived as not a team player, not helpful. Don't even ask. No is a complete sentence, and I want to reinforce that, but it depends on the context. It depends on the situation. And while that's true that in some parts of life, this works, at work is a little bit more complicated. In a collaborative environment, our goal isn't just to reject a task, is to protect our time while preserving our relationships. It's about shifting our mindset from rejection to renegotiation. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That we're going to find ways to negotiate. So that's going to be one of the easier ways for you to set a boundary without saying no. The strategies aren't about cover all. The idea here is to be assertive and clear instead of you still want to show up as a helpful person. So negotiator is going to be your friend, and I am going to give you a couple of phrases and different things that you can do to find ways to negotiate instead of going straight for a yes. So you want to be perceived as an engaged member of your team and still have a relationship with your coworkers instead of being the person in the corner that nobody asks for anything. Because in the workplace, there are going to be times where you are going to be the one who need the help of your colleagues. That's why if you become somebody who is perceived as don't want to collaborate, don't want to do anything, what happens when you are the one in need of that help? Right? So it's not about what you say, but how you say it. And we're going to uncover these things here. Become an assertive team player. How to set boundaries without using the word no. And I'm not saying that we're not going to say, oh, I cannot do this, but it's just like you're just not going to say, no, I can't do this. We're going to work different ways where you can set small boundaries in ways that make you being perceived that you are paying attention, you are listening, you want to help, but that help is going to be on your terms. So these are going to be your go-to strategies for setting boundaries in a way that feels helpful, not confrontational. First, how do you buy time for yourself to make a smart decision? Second, how to negotiate the terms of that request. And third, some simple proactive things you can do to protect your focus every single day. So buy time and assess the power of the pause. So if you get anything out of this presentation, one thing I want you to get for sure is you have the power to always pause before you respond to a request. You don't have to say yes or no right away. You can pause first before you respond. Negotiate the how and when. Think of the yes and yes but type of approach. Protect your focus. Proactive, low-stake strategies. It's not going to be, a confrontational type of conversation. These are going to be easy ways for you in your day-to-day to begin setting those boundaries. Tactic 1, buy time and assess. Your best friend is the pause. So many of us, especially if we have people-pleasing tendencies like I do, have an automatic yes reflex. A request comes in, and before we even thought about it, as I said before, we just say yes, we just agree. The pause is your secret weapon to break that habit. It gives you a moment to step back, look at your actual workload, check if your house is full, and make an intentional choice instead of a reactive one. This doesn't have to be awkward at all. You can simply use professional phrases to create that space. For example, let me check my schedule and I'll get back to you on that. This sentence helps you buy in more time. Can you send me the details by email so I can take a look? This is great because it also gives you, something in writing so you can read, before you say yes or no. Or let me think about it. Let me see how I can best contribute, and I'll let you know tomorrow. Whenever you get a request, this shows that you're taking that request seriously, that you are giving the attention, but you are also thinking about your own commitments before you respond. You're not saying yes or no. You saw it, it came in, you gave a response, but you're not saying yes or no immediately. Tactic number 2 is negotiate the how and when. Use yes and yes, but to offer a solution. Okay, so after we have paused and assessed, you might decide you can help. And that's great. You're going to collaborate with a colleague. That's awesome. But not exactly in the way that the person asked. This is where you move into the negotiation part of a boundary, using a yes and or a yes but framework. This is so useful in boundary setting because you are agreeing to help, but on your terms, in ways that work for you. And sometimes the other person doesn't even realize that you are actually setting a boundary because you are agreeing to help, but you're telling them how and when you're going to provide that help. For example, you can limit the scope of your commitment. If someone asks you to run a new company initiative, you could say, I can help with the initial steps, but I won't be able to manage the whole project. You are still contributing, but you're putting a clear fence. You are, around your involvement, you're letting them know how you can help and how much of that time frame you're going to be committing to that project. You are setting the expectation regarding how you can help, not letting them tell you how they wanted to help. Or you can adjust the deadline. This is a really great one. So let's say your boss gives you a new report and wants it by the end of the day. You could say, yes, I can get this done, but to do it well, I might need until Friday or whatever the time frame works for you. Would that work? This frames your boundary around producing high quality work, which is something every manager wants. My favorite one is to clarify your priorities. When a new task lands at your plate or, just get something new on the email, you can ask, this sounds important. To give it the focus it deserves, which one of my tasks should I deprioritize? This is a brilliant move because it shows you're thinking strategically about the team's goals, but also making your workload visible to your manager. And if you want 2 more ways that whenever you get something for a manager, you try to figure out how you can respond to that. After this presentation, we're going to have the Q&A, and I have 2 other ways that you can talk to your manager. So if this is something that you want, let us know, ask a question about it, and I can give you those other tips because I understand that only you know your work environment and only you know the relationship you have with your manager. And that's important because depending on your work environment, you might need different sentences there whenever your manager, gives you new work. Just to kind of try to understand, you might even need to request maybe a quick meeting or a video meeting if you work remotely, or a call, just to figure it out, how can they help you add one more thing to your plate? Because one thing that I want to mention before we move forward is a lot of times, especially if, you have flexible job, you work remotely, your manager doesn't work in the same location as you in case, you work in a hybrid setting, is that they might not know everything you have on your plate. Sometimes managers, they don't really even know the exact task that you take. They don't understand the skills you have, the way you do your tasks and all these different things. And if you don't have regular one-on-ones with your manager and you're not discussing your workload, they might not even know all the things you already have on your plate. So there are ways that whenever you get a request and you really feel like you need to do a little pushback, in a sense that I need to understand what's a priority here because I just got a new thing and it's urgent. So that might be something that you might need some, extra help. So yeah, I can go over two other ways, after when we get to the Q&A session. Tactic number 3 is protect your focus. Low stakes boundaries. Small fences make great neighbors. Our final tactic is about being proactive. Think of these as small, everyday fences you can build that makes a huge difference over time. These are low stakes boundaries because they aren't direct responses to a big request. They're just habits that help you manage your time and energy. These are some of my favorite ways to help people begin setting boundaries in ways that are not confrontational, and they're easy things that they can do on the day to day. So we're going to go over them right now. So for example, you have more control over your calendar than you think. And I'm saying this, even as an individual contributor. So what I'm saying this, all the conversation today, it doesn't matter necessarily the kind of role that you have at work. If you are an individual contributor or a manager, there are things that you can do to begin setting those boundaries. For example, with your calendar, you can schedule buffer time. Just 10 minutes, 15 minutes between back-to-back meetings. So you have a moment to breathe and reset. Just block it off as busy. If you have, meetings like back-to-back, it's like make sure that as soon as you start getting those meetings that you start blocking buffer time. And if someone comes back and say, hey, I need to schedule this meeting, but I noticed in your calendar that you have this 15 minutes block out, pause again before you respond and figure it out if you want to add one more thing. So the buffer time is also good because it helps you take those breaks. You don't need to be on your desk for 2 hours back to back. It's good to just get up, walk for a little bit. So that's why those 10-15 minutes are good to have in your calendar. So you can also set digital boundaries. And this is a good one for all of us here. If you are a remote employee, if you are working in a flexible setting, a hybrid worker, is essential. Even if you are in the office right now, it's essential to have these digital boundaries. Put a simple line in your email signature that can say, I will respond to emails within 24 hours, especially if you work globally. I have other tips too, again, that I can go over during Q&A, something that I've done because things that I did in the past when I worked globally, like pretty much a 24/7 calendar in project management that I had to work with people from all over the world at all different time zones. I had to add like a core hours notice in my email signature. So when I got an email at 3 in the morning, they would understand that I wouldn't get probably back into the next day at 9-10 a.m. So my time. So sometimes it's important to have those little boundaries, even if you need to set an auto response. And of course only you know again your work environment. So if you're going to do something like that, I highly recommend that you have a conversation with your manager to let them know that is it okay if I put this line in my email signature, or if I put an autoresponder after 10 p.m. or something along those lines. So it's good to communicate that instead of just doing something, without communicating to your manager. I always go for communication, transparency, and I think that's a great way to also build a relationship with your manager so they understand the reasons why you're doing something, and not just, I don't know if you have ever seen that meme, you see in many places. I saw, I think last week on LinkedIn, where people were like putting notices on their chairs, like "Don't talk to me" and things like that. And I feel like that can backfire depending on your work environment, because I have experienced this in one of my jobs where, people had those notices. We were in an open office, and they would put those no, and then there was a day that we just had a meeting about it, and our manager pretty much said that, we're not going to do that. That's not something that we want. We want to be a collaborative office, all these different things. So it's like, and if you work remote and you have the chat tools to communicate with people, use, maybe there might be the do not disturb, maybe busy, these different things, and just see what is the protocol that people usually follow and see if that works for you. And if you need to, for some reason, set do not disturb, talk to your manager in advance and let them know, hey, I need 2 hours to finish this task. So I'm going to, or tell your team even, so I'm going to put do not disturb. So that's why. But if you guys need anything, this is the way to reach me if something urgent comes up. So communication and transparency is always a good way to also help you set a boundary. So, as I was saying, for the digital boundaries, the focus time, if your communication, the messaging tool has a focus time or do not disturb, just find ways to be non-confrontational, to signal that you are doing deep work. And finally, a really important one is to protect your lunch break. Yes, it doesn't matter if you work from home, it doesn't matter if you work in the office, if you are doing hybrid work, block it off your calendar if you can, and physically step away from your desk. It gives you a real mental reset and reinforces the idea for yourself and for others that rest is a necessary and part of a productive workday. I started doing that, in some of my jobs, and it was just refreshing. Of course, there's going to be times when, you have meetings that you have to attend during your lunch break. But if you can step away from your desk and have lunch, even if it's by yourself, in a break room, or if you are home, at your kitchen table, it's better than just be surrounded by your screens and electronics at all times. And if you are checking your screen, checking your phone, maybe you're checking something fun, maybe you're watching something that takes your mind away from work. So those breaks are really important. Agenda item number 3 is the what if, navigating pushback when setting boundaries backfire. Let's tackle the part of the presentation that addresses everyone's biggest fear. What happens when someone doesn't like your boundary? What happens if you do all these things, you communicate beautifully, and your boss, the teammate, gets annoyed? This is the number one fear that holds people back from setting boundaries. So let's talk about it. First, your fear is valid. And I understand because I've been there myself. The pushback can and does happen, especially in a work culture that is not used to people having healthy boundaries. Someone who is used to you always responding right away with a yes might be surprised when, or maybe even irritated, the first time you don't say yes right away. The first time you say a sentence that, you're asking for a little bit of time. But I want you to think about it this way. And this is a quote that I want you to remember. The discomfort you feel setting the boundary is temporary. It's temporary. It's going to go away. The stress and resentment from not having that boundary is chronic. It stays with you day after day. And that's what can lead to burnout. So while the discomfort is temporary, not doing anything about it and continue to be the yes person, that can cause resentment over time, and that can lead to burnout over time. Often the negative reaction isn't about the boundary itself, but the delivery. Remember, it's not just about what you say, but how you say it. If you are calm, respectful, and frame it collaboratively, you reduce the changes of a negative reaction. The key is to remember your goal. You are not trying to start a conflict. You are trying to find a sustainable way to do your best work. Remember to pause and not react immediately. And I'm saying this even for, my friends here working remotely, using the messaging tools, email, relying heavily in digital communication tools. Yes, there are ways that you can communicate with people in ways that feels collaborative and not like confrontational. So before you send a message, read it out loud. Make sure that you edit anything that doesn't make sense. And it's very easy for us sometimes, especially in messaging, tools, chat tools, to just like action, reaction, action, reaction. You right away, you're replying without even thinking about what you're writing. And that can be, we miss things in translation, even though maybe speaking the same language. It's just the tone, right? Like, have you thought about the way you wrote this? Have you thought about, it's like, it's good to pause and see the way you're writing your messages to ensure that. And I'm not saying you need to write, an entire like book about why you're not doing something or why you want to negotiate this boundary. Like, you don't need to go overboard, but it's just like the tone of that message. So always think about that as you are writing your message. How to handle pushback gracefully. A three-step process for responding. So if you get pushback, don't panic. This is normal. This is likely going to happen. But there's a simple three-step process you can use to handle the conversation gracefully and professionally. First, acknowledge and empathize. The most important thing you can do to de-escalate the situation is to show the other person that you hear them. You're there for them. Don't get defensive. You can say something like, I understand this is a tight deadline and you are in a tough spot. So you understand where they are. It's like you're being pathetic about it. This immediately shows that you are on their side. Second, restate your position calmly. You don't need to apologize or over explain, as I was saying, write like a bunch of paragraphs. You don't need to do this. Just calmly and firmly repeat your reality. Is a reality for you. You have a lot going on. So you can say, because I am at full capacity with project, and then you name the project, I won't be able to take this on right now. It's simple, professional, and non-negotiable. You're setting the boundary. You're trying to be collaborative. And of course, if you can help with something else, or you can direct this person to a different resource or to a different person, you can do that as well. But you're saying that right now, you cannot help them. Finally, and this is the most critical step, collaborate on a solution. So this is a great big way, amazing way to negotiate a boundary. It turns you from being like that roadblock into a problem solving partner. And this is something that sometimes people don't even notice that you're doing this. So you can ask, how can we work together to solve this? Can we move the deadline? Is there someone else who could assist? So you're negotiating, you're trying to figure it out. You're being collaborative, problem solving, try to figure out how we can solve this thing together instead of right away saying no. This shifts the focus back to the shared goal and reinforces that you are, in fact, a team player. You are trying to help. Boundaries as a team player. The key takeaways from this presentation. We have covered a lot today, so I want to leave with a few key ideas to help you move forward. First, and this is the most important mindset shift, remember that boundaries are about sustainability, not resistance. This isn't about being difficult. It's about managing your energy so you can continue to do great work and be a great teammate for the long haul. And also, I want to clarify this here. It doesn't mean that you have to always be negotiating, that you always have to be saying no to things. There might be times that you actually, let's say, there's a skill that you really like. Let's say you really like to update, the company website or something along those lines. And this is a skill that you really enjoy using. Like you don't do much of that, at work right now, but you know how to do it. And you really love whenever you get a chance to be creative. If you have the capacity, you don't necessarily need to say no to that. You can say yes. It's an extra task. It might not be related to the job that you're doing, but it might be something that lights you up, something that you really want to work. And that's when you can say, I can help, but I'm going to do this and this and this piece. And then you can continue, or you can maybe find somebody else who can continue the project. So setting a boundary doesn't mean that you always have to say no to things or to negotiate things, but you can figure out how I am going to help. This is how I am going to help. So sustainability is key, especially at work, because you have to collaborate with people. Ideally, we would all like to work independently and do our own thing. And yes, we get to do that some, but a lot of times we are part of a team. So we have to find ways to collaborate with people. But it's finding ways to negotiate those boundaries that's going to help you keep it sustainable. Second is not what you say, but again, how you say it. The goal is to shift from a hard no to a collaborative yes and or yes, but you're not shutting down the conversation or the collaboration. You're starting a negotiation. And a lot of times people don't even understand that you're doing that. So that's why this is an easier way to start setting boundaries instead of giving that hard no, especially in the workplace. And that's what we're talking about here. I'm not talking about family relationships. I'm talking about workplace relationships, because you have to work with those people. Third, remember the power of the pause. Giving yourself just a moment before you respond is the single most effective tool for breaking that automatic yes habit. And finally, remember that advocating for your own needs is also advocating for the quality of your work. When you're not overworked and exhausted, you produce better results for everyone. You don't have to build the whole fence today. I know this can feel like a lot, and you might be thinking, where do I even begin? But I want to be very clear here. You don't have to build the entire fence today. The goal is just to install one single fence post. Real lasting change starts with small, consistent actions. So I want to give you a very clear and manageable call to action here. Your mission this week or next week, whenever you choose, is to choose one of the low stakes boundaries we talked about and practice. Just one. Maybe you will delay your response to a non-urgent email. You will maybe block 30 minutes of focus time in your calendar, and you're going to honor it. Or maybe you're going to commit to taking a real lunch break away from your desk. Pick one that feels achievable and try it out. See how that feels. The goal here isn't perfection, it's practice. Small wins build confidence, and that confidence will make it easier to set bigger boundaries when you need it. And that leads to our free resource. Thanks for staying until the end of the presentation. If you want to set your first boundary this week, go to the link and download this free guide. In this guide, you will learn the 8 common scenarios at work and multiple ways to respond to each one while you set a boundary without giving a hard no, without being confrontational. It's your first step to helping you protect your time and energy and avoid burnout. Go to my website is Anna Goehner, ANAGOEHNER.com/boundaries to get this guide. I highly recommend. I built this guide for people who are trying to set boundaries, who always hear the word no. No is a complete sentence, but at work we know that can backfire, that doesn't always work, and that can make you not be perceived as a team player, and that's not what we want. We want to still be a team player, being collaborative, but also you need to learn how to do the negotiating a little bit, and that's what this guide is going to help you do. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you spending time with me today and learning more about how to set boundaries at work.
Thank you for your time, Anna. That was fantastic. Getting a lot of really positive feedback in the comment section as well. And I have to say that when you were describing some of the problems that arise from that automatic yes, I was having flashbacks to my first roll or two out of college. Like, definitely burned myself out by not saying no enough. So do you have some time for some questions? Is it okay for you? All right, wonderful. So our questions here, our first one. So this is a good question, maybe a little tricky to answer, but this person is asking, at what point do you make that determination that the environment is just kind of, too toxic for you, no matter what boundaries you try to set? How do you make that determination?
So I've worked in a couple places that I would consider toxic, but this is something that I will say. Of course, I don't know your situation, and thank you so much for asking this question. It's a tricky topic, and I will say this: do a little bit of research about what is a toxic environment, because everyone has a different definition for that. Sure. And a lot of times they will say that something simple is, oh, this is a toxic workplace, and it might not be. And I'm not, I think I don't take this lightly, because I've been there. I burned out. I have numerous serious health issues because of toxic work environments. So I will say, do a little bit of a research to learn, what are the signs that I am in a toxic work environment. I have some blog posts on my website, that you might want to check out. I talk a lot about, job search, career, but also well-being is a big one for me as somebody who had serious health issue. So I will say, do that research to try to understand that, okay, in fact, I am, the work hours are crazy. The communication is really bad. The overall, the way we communicate with each other is sometimes aggressive or, not good. The manager relationship is not good. There's a lot of micromanaging. All these different things can be part of a toxic work environment. I will say you can start small with maybe setting different, times in your calendar and see how that goes. Let's say the negotiation, right? You're not going to say no, but you're going to maybe try to redirect the person. But have you checked with so-and-so? They might be a better resource for this instead of you. And again, it depends on your environment, because I work places and, I don't know if it's your situation or not, that I was working remotely and we could not put do not disturb. Had to be showing as online, like the green light, at all times, because, and we were very busy. We had insane projects, insane deadlines. And there were times that your chat tool was blowing up with multiple conversations, and you were trying to concentrate, and that was really, really tough. So, I don't know your work environment, but if you can kind of manage that, another tip that I would have for you is, if people are going on and on about stuff, either find a way to kind of mute that, or let them know, guys, I'm working, in this project. I'll get back to you guys at 11 a.m., once I'm done with this. If you need something urgent, if you have, if text message is part of your environment, just tell them if something is urgent, just text me or send me an email or whatever it is. Make sure that you try to set the little boundaries here and there. But I don't take toxic workplace lightly, and I am so sorry that you are in this situation. But I would just say, just do some research, because people these days, they have definitions of toxic work environment, like anything is a toxic work environment, and I feel like not really. But it's just like, I'm not dismissing by any means, because I'm telling you, I've been there. I had serious health issues that I don't wish for anyone. But I will say, there are little things that you can try. But also, like, if you are in this situation, it's important to start figuring out, like, your exit strategy. Exit strategy also means, if you are, can you leave it now? Do you have, like, the finances? Do you have the means to leave it now? If you don't, one thing that I, tell my clients sometimes when they are in situations like this is, put in your mindset that, like, this is going to be a temporary job that you are trying to get out, and then you start, your job search, like, on the side, like, whenever you get, like, time during the week or on the weekends, that's when you're going to start focusing on. You can do the job, but put already, like, once you put in the mindset that you're not going to stay in this job, something shifts within you, because the situation that you're dealing with right now is temporary, is not going to continue, because you're trying to go to a better job, to get to a better place. But I will also say, if the situation is unbearable and you're getting sick, like I did, then try to figure it out if there's a way that you can get out as soon as possible. So yeah, I don't take toxic workplaces lightly, because I've been part of it and I suffered a lot. So that's what I would say. Try your best to set those boundaries, but if you really need to get out, figure out a way, because I'll say this too: a toxic work environment does not change. If it's toxic for you, like, a new manager can come in, a new teammate, it doesn't mean the thing is going to change, because it's kind of how they do business, is how they do work, it's what is expected. So it won't likely to change. So in that case, unfortunately, you have to be the one who finds a way to change the situation for you.
Yeah. And thinking about that exit strategy is so important, because if you just kind of dive blindly into the unknown, you could end up in a worse situation in terms of your mental well-being, than if you had planned that exit strategy. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Our next one here, this person is asking, kind of going to sort of the job searching and interviewing part of the process. What are some ways you can tell if a company has a healthy culture before you accept a job?
So it's something that I write about, I talk about, is companies hire big marketing firms to create, copy for their website. So never trust everything you see in a company website, because, sometimes, they are putting themselves up here when they're actually not there. So always go through different websites, go, maybe LinkedIn, maybe Glass, or like other places, FlexJobs, just try to figure it out. What are people saying about this company? What is, like, the information that they have, just find reviews everywhere. Or you can also approach people, figure out who works for that company, approach them and maybe ask, like, oh, I read the company about this, is it like how they operate? Is it, they might not say the right or wrong, or they might have a different opinion. Like, I work places where my department was the most toxic department in the company. Everybody else was really happy, So it's like, it was a department issue, not necessarily a company-wide issue. So I will say, do your research outside of just looking at the company website. That's one of the best ways to try to understand a little bit better, because anyone can say, oh, we are flexible, we provide work-life balance and all these different things. But then the reality is, these people are working 60 hours a week. They're expected to check emails all the time, and It really depends. So I feel like it's good to do your research outside of what you read in a company website.
I definitely agree with that. And one thing to add, let me know what you think about this, but in the interview, asking questions beyond just tell me about your company culture, ask about the things that are important to you. So like, can you give me an example of a time where you change something based on, employee feedback, or what are some examples of how you help employees maintain a healthy work-life balance or work-life harmony? So yeah,
Yes, yes. I have interview guide on my website, and that's one of the things that I address in that guide, because I feel like if you go surface level in your questions, you are going to get surface level responses.
mhm,
So like if you are in an interview, it's important to ask the questions that matter the most to you. Of course, you're going to ask about the job, you're going to ask about the company, but if work-life balance is a big deal for you, which is a huge deal for me after going through a very big health thing, it's like I will ask questions, one, two, maybe even three, about work-life balance.
yeah,
Like how do you handle work-life balance within the team? Like how do you guys, what is the expectation of communication outside of work?
mm,
Like, are we supposed to be checking our phones? Are we supposed This gives you hints of, because I'll tell you this, and this is also part of my content sometimes, is this thing about, everybody can say, oh, work-life balance means different things for different people,
mm,
including, let's say, your company might be all about work-life balance, but your manager's idea of work-life balance might be completely different.
right.
Maybe they are workaholic, they like to work, so for them work-life balance could mean, oh, I expect you to check your phone until 9 p.m. and then after that you're good. That might be their idea of work-life balance. Or, if we need to check emails on the weekends, that should be, expected.
Mm,
That could be their idea of work-life balance. And I would say this: be very careful sometimes, with startup companies, because
mm,
sometimes, that could be an expectation because they're trying to get a business off the ground.
right.
So the expectation there can be bigger, higher when it comes to like your time and your priorities. So I feel like it's important to ask, do the research, as I was saying, outside of the company website, but also ask the questions that matter the most to you. You're not going to make the interview all about just those questions, of course, but you are going to find ways to ask at least two or three that
Yeah.
are really key for you to know if you want to work for the company. And if you didn't really get your question answered, and let's say you move on, you get an offer, don't be afraid to send an email or get on a phone call and make sure that you clarify whatever is blurry, whatever
Mm,
you don't know. It's okay to do this, because in the same way, that you are interviewing, they are interviewing you, you are interviewing the company to make sure that this is a good place for you to be. And that goes along with the previous questions about a toxic work environment, because Keith, you said something that happened to me. Unfortunately, I was so desperate to leave a toxic workplace that I ended up in another one, because I didn't do, see, everything I talk about and do a lot of it is part of my own life experiences that I don't want other people to experience.
yeah.
I have done that. And it was one of the worst things I've done, because I end up, even the burnout was just like, I didn't even know what to do with myself anymore, because I just left one bad place to another.
Yep.
So I highly recommend that during the interview process, you do your due diligence by, trying to figure out information, and also like asking the right questions for the things that matter to you.
That's really good. No, I think that's fantastic advice. Let's try to squeeze in one more question here, Anna. So this person's asking, how do you handle a situation where you have established some boundaries, but leadership is just not respecting those boundaries? Is there anything you can do in that situation?
And this is going to happen, I'll say, because if you are used to say yes to everything, especially like the automatic, like, yes, oh, yes, I can help. I feel like, you try whatever you can, right? Blocking time in your calendar, like try to like negotiating the boundary and all, but like maybe it could be be time for maybe having a conversation. And I will say this because if you have like a very heavy workload, it goes back to what I said earlier in this presentation. Your manager might not know everything you have on your plate. And a lot of times, because I work with a lot of managers, they don't really know what their employees do because they don't have those skills. They have a sense of what the people are doing because they have to know what their entire department does. Of course, they are a manager, they need to know, but they don't necessarily have learned all the different skills that you do. They don't know, your process sometimes. They don't know all the things that you're doing. So in their minds, this person can handle this too. Or sometimes it's perception, right? Because I'm a person who I love getting things done. So my managers always perceive me like, oh yeah, just send it to her. She's going to get it done. Because that's how I've always been. But I have to give those pushbacks and actually have those one-on-one conversation. But if you do this, bring an agenda, bring the list of things that you're working on, let them know the challenges, let them know the potential delays. If you take on one more thing, I think it's important, again, goes back to transparency, to try as much as possible to come with data, right? Data, like make sure that you come with that information that they can actually see. And if this is, this is a virtual call, make sure that you have at least like one slide, or you send like something to them, or you share your screen so they see the things that you're working on. Because if they don't know what's going on, they might see you getting everything done. They might think, oh, this person is, they can't handle anything, when they don't know that you're working behind the scenes, like extra 2-3 hours every night just to get something done. So this is one of the things that I would do if I were in this situation.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice. And Anna, I know I said that was the last question, but we did also have some requests. You mentioned you had 2 additional negotiation tactics to use with your manager. So if you don't mind sharing those, I think everybody would appreciate that.
Sure. Let me just get, my screen froze. Just give me 1 second. I'll get to it.
And if you didn't,
yeah,
I
got it. Okay. So for the manager request, there are 2 other ways that you can say. And again, it doesn't matter if you're working remotely, in person, hybrid. You can say, let's say you got something as a message, either in a chat or as an email. You can say, thank you for your message. I appreciate you asking me to perform this task. Can we meet for a few minutes to discuss this today? I want to chat quickly and brainstorm alternatives to help me prioritize my work. I would greatly appreciate your guidance. I checked your calendar and you might be available from 3:30 to 4 p.m. Can I send a calendar invite for 15 minutes? You are setting the expectation. The other message would be, thank you for your message. I would love to help, but I might not be able to complete this today. I'm finishing my projects. I must leave. Let's say if you have children and you must leave a certain time to pick up your child from childcare, you can say, I must leave at 5 to pick up my child from childcare. Can this task wait until tomorrow morning? I could get it done by 11 a.m. If not, is it possible to check with another team member? Please let me know. I know this might sound like a big pushback, but believe me, sometimes you get stuff in your inbox and you think, the manager might think, oh, let's get this done today, because they think you might have the time. But sometimes the pushback can happen, or they might help you or send this to a different team member, or help you like, okay, maybe don't finish this today. If you're giving them a priority list of everything that you need to get done today, maybe they'll say, oh, what if you do this tomorrow? But sometimes we're so immersed in our workload and it's so busy that we can't really see like what we can deprioritize, and because there's so much coming at us. But sometimes somebody else with a fresh perspective, especially your manager, they might come in and say, yeah, maybe you get this done tomorrow. Maybe this might be another way that you can start building that boundary. And again, this might be a pushback that you do one time. You don't need to say the exact same thing every single time, but it might be some ways that you can start setting those boundaries little by little.
Well, and Anna, just an observation, sort of 2 kind of common themes that I've noticed with your tactics. They either, demonstrate that you are putting the company's benefit at the forefront of your mind. Like, I want to focus on this, but I'm worried that with my other priorities, I won't be able to put my full effort in. Like, that's a benefit to the company, or offering alternative solutions. So it's not just a nope, can't do it, find somebody else. It's proposing other solutions, showing that you care about quality of work. Like, all those are really important things.
Yeah, and that's the goal, because that's what it means to be a team player. You don't
Right.
need to say yes to everything, but you also need to show that you are trying to collaborate. You're trying to find a solution.
Right. Yep. Awesome. Well, I think that's a good closing point for us, Anna. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed your time here.
Yeah, thank you so much, you all, for being here. Really, really appreciate you being here with me today.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you to all of our attendees. Really appreciate your time. Hope that you enjoyed the presentation and the Q&A. We will make sure to send out the recording to everybody. That usually comes out within a day or two. But thank you once again, Anna. Thank you to all our attendees. And on behalf of FlexJobs, we wish you all the best of luck in setting boundaries and advocating for yourself. Take care.